Welcome to English with Zenko Master. Get ready to learn something new today.
My name is Elisa Moreno. I am 27 years old, and I live in Barcelona, Spain. I work for a global marketing company, and I've been in the same office for 4 years. I share a small corner desk with my team, and most of the time, I try to keep my head down and do my work. I am not the loudest person in the room. I don't lead meetings. I take notes. I support others. I complete reports on time. But I am not the one who gets noticed. There was someone who did get noticed. His name was Daniel Harper. He joined our company 2 years ago, and everything changed. He was confident from the first day. He had a bright smile and a smooth voice that made everyone turn to listen when he spoke. He remembered names quickly. He asked smart questions in meetings. He came in early and stayed late, and people respected him for it. Even our difficult clients seemed to like him. He handled pressure easily, or at least that's how it looked. At first I admired him. Then I started watching him too closely, and slowly, something began to grow inside me. It was jealousy. Quiet and slow at first. A soft thought that whispered, "He's better than you." I ignored it. But it stayed. And it grew louder each time he succeeded. Daniel became the person everyone mentioned. He won 2 internal awards. He was chosen to represent our team in the regional strategy meeting. My manager asked me to help him prepare his presentation. I agreed, of course. I smiled and told him I was happy to assist. But that night when I got home, I cried in the shower without knowing why. I told myself I didn't want attention. I told myself I was different. I believed for years that quiet people like me didn't need praise to feel worthy. But when I saw him being praised for things I also did things I had done longer, it felt like I was invisible. It wasn't about the awards. It was the feeling of being ignored. I watched Daniel walk into rooms and light them up. Meanwhile, I blended into walls. I started checking the clock when he arrived. If he came early, I came earlier. If he sent 2 emails, I sent 3. I stayed late, hoping someone would notice. I volunteered for more work, but the compliments still went to him. Even when we worked on the same project, clients wrote his name in the feedback. They never mentioned me. I began to dislike him, not because he was cruel or selfish. He wasn't. In fact, he was polite and friendly. He always offered to help if someone was struggling. He greeted people with warmth. That made it worse. I couldn't hate him, and yet I did. I hated the way he reminded me of everything I was not. I hated that I couldn't stop comparing myself to him. We sat close. Sometimes we talked. He once asked me if I wanted coffee when he was going to the kitchen. I said no, too quickly. I avoided eye contact after that. He didn't ask again. The more success he had, the more distance I created. I began to stay silent during team calls. I stopped sharing ideas. I didn't want to be part of his spotlight. I wanted to be far away from it. I thought if I became smaller, the pain would also shrink. But it didn't. It grew heavier. Then came the moment that shifted everything. It was a Thursday afternoon. The office was quiet because half of the team was attending a conference. I had finished a report early and went to sit by the window in the break area. I just wanted to look at something that didn't move. My head hurts. My heart felt tired. I needed to breathe. Daniel walked in holding a mug. I thought he'd pass by, but he didn't. He came straight to me and sat in the chair beside mine. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You've been quiet lately. Is everything all right?" I nodded. I looked away. I didn't want him to see the weight behind my eyes. "You know," he continued, "I used to think you were the most calm person in the team. You never panic. You always stay focused. That's something I admire." His words hit me harder than I expected. My throat closed. For months, I had believed I was nothing next to him. I had forgotten how to see myself without that comparison. And now he was sitting beside me, saying he admired something in me. I wanted to tell him everything. How I had measured every step against his. How I had wished he would fail, just once, so I could breathe. How I had hated myself for not being better. But the words didn't come. I only said, "It's hard to keep up with someone like you." Daniel didn't smile. He looked at the mug in his hands and said, "I try hard. Too hard sometimes. You think I'm confident, but I'm not. I'm scared of being average. That's why I push myself so much." That surprised me. I stared at him. He continued, "I worked in a place before where I was laid off during a performance review. I never forgot that feeling. Since then, I have tried to be perfect. It's exhausting. But I don't know how to stop. The silence between us changed. It wasn't heavy anymore, and it was soft. Understanding." For the first time, I saw him not as the man who outshone me, but as someone carrying his own shadows. He had fears. He had a reason to run so fast. It made me think how many people had I judged without knowing their story. I only saw the surface of Daniel's life, not what was underneath. I had been jealous of his strengths, but blind to his pain. That evening, I stayed late in the office, but not to compete. I opened a new folder and began writing down small goals not to win more praise, but to grow in ways that mattered to me. I wrote, "Speak once in the Monday meeting, give one idea in the strategy session, update my resume, take a course I've been avoiding." They were small steps, but they were mine. The next day, Daniel passed by my desk. He didn't say much, but we exchanged a nod. A quiet one. It felt like the beginning of something more honest. I didn't change overnight. I still had moments when I looked at him and felt that old sting of comparison. But now, I had something stronger than jealousy. I had awareness. I understood that admiration could live without envy, and that growth could happen without bitterness. Before I share the rest of my story, could you please tell me where you're from? It gives me strength to know there's someone out there who listens to me, who understands me. It means a lot to me. In the weeks that followed, something inside me began to shift. It was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like the sound of soft rain after a storm. I didn't stop noticing Daniel's achievements, but I stopped tying my self-worth to them. I still worked hard, but I worked for myself, not to chase or beat someone else. I returned to my old habits with a new reason. I organized my tasks better. I volunteered for one project at a time instead of taking on everything. I gave input in meetings without worrying how it compared to his. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged in my own space. People noticed, though not in the way I had once craved. My manager mentioned she appreciated my clarity during a team briefing. A colleague I rarely spoke to asked if I could teach her how I structured my reports. These weren't awards or applause, but they felt more honest. They felt real. Daniel and I didn't suddenly become close friends, but the air between us changed. There was no longer a quiet tension or invisible competition. We began to share short moments, a comment about a project, a laugh about a technical glitch, or a nod of respect after a well-done task. These exchanges were small, but they reminded me of something I had forgotten. Work was not about being the best. It was about being part of something and growing through it. One morning, I arrived early to prepare for a team workshop. The room was empty, the lights still warming up. I took out my laptop and opened the presentation slides I had prepared over the weekend. This time, I wasn't supporting someone else's idea. This was mine. I had pitched it 3 weeks ago, and to my surprise, the leadership team had approved it. It was about improving internal communication. I had collected data, interviewed different departments, and created a clear, simple plan. I believed in it, and that gave me strength. As the room filled, I felt a tightness in my chest, but it was different from before. It wasn't fear of failure. It was the weight of responsibility. I stood in front of my team, clicked the first slide, and began to speak. My voice shook a little in the beginning, but I didn't stop. I looked around the room and saw eyes watching, heads nodding. I was not invisible. I was here, and I was being heard. After the session, people clapped. Not loudly, not wildly, but enough to make my chest feel warm. Daniel came up to me and said, "That was excellent. You made a complex issue feel simple and human." I thanked him, and I meant it. I didn't feel smaller at that moment. I didn't feel like I had to shrink under his compliment. I stood tall and accepted it. Later that week, something happened that reminded me how far I had come. We received the results of the annual staff survey. Our manager shared that team engagement had improved significantly, and several anonymous responses mentioned the workshop I had led. My name wasn't in them, but I recognized the words. It didn't matter that I wasn't named. I knew it was me, and that was enough. But growth is never a straight line. One afternoon, I overheard 2 colleagues in the kitchen talking about Daniel. They were impressed by how he managed a difficult client call. One of them joked that he would probably be promoted soon. I smiled as I walked by, but I felt that old ache return. I hated how easily it still found me. I went back to my desk and sat in silence. I reminded myself that someone else's success does not remove the value of my own. That evening, I stayed back to finish a task. Daniel was there too. As we packed our things, he looked at me and said, "Do you ever feel like you're racing yourself?" I paused. I hadn't expected a question like that. I nodded. "Yes, all the time." He smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Sometimes I forget where the finish line even is." We stood there, both tired from work, both caught in our own thoughts. It struck me then that the world of work, with all its pressure and pace, often made us feel like we had to compete when in fact we were all just trying to survive the day. Maybe we were all more alike than we thought. 1 month later, a role opened up in another department. It was a position that involved coaching junior staff and helping improve onboarding. My old self would have doubted whether I was right for it. But this time, I applied. I wrote the application carefully. I explained why I believed I could help others learn and grow. I didn't mention Daniel, and I didn't compare myself to anyone. I talked about my own path and what I had learned along the way. A few days after the interview, I got a call. I was selected. I was going to start the new role in 2 weeks. When I told Daniel, he looked genuinely happy for me. "They're lucky to have you," he said. And I believed him. Not because he said it, but because by then I had learned to see my own value without needing his confirmation. On my last day with the team, we had a small goodbye lunch. There were no balloons or speeches, just kind words and a few jokes. Daniel gave me a small notebook with a handwritten note inside. It said, "For your ideas, your quiet strength, and your new beginning. Keep writing your own story." I carried that notebook home in my bag and sat with it in my lap on the bus. I thought about how far I had come, from jealousy and silence to growth and change. I thought about how Daniel had once been a mirror I used to judge myself, but he had turned out to be more than that. He had been a part of my journey, not an obstacle in it. That night, I wrote the first page in the notebook. I didn't write about goals or tasks. I wrote a letter to myself. I wrote, "You don't have to shine like anyone else. You only have to show up, keep growing, and be honest about what you feel. That is enough." And for the first time in my working life, I believed it. Starting the new role felt both exciting and unfamiliar. The title was not a big one, but it gave me something I had never had before, a fresh place without old comparisons. No one in this department knew who I used to be. They didn't know that I had once measured my value by the shadow of someone else. Here, I was simply Elisa, the new onboarding coordinator. And that was enough for me. The first week was full of introductions. I met with managers, new hires, and support staff. I listened more than I spoke, trying to understand how things worked. I took notes in every meeting, not because I had to, but because I wanted to remember how each part of the system connected. For the first time in my professional life, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just trying to understand. One afternoon, I sat across from a young woman named Nora. She was new to the company and looked nervous during our onboarding session. She apologized for asking too many questions. I smiled and told her I had once been too afraid to ask any. That made her laugh. Later that day, she sent me an email that said, "Thanks for making this place feel less scary." I read that line twice. It stayed with me. I remembered all the times I had felt invisible in my old team, and now I was the person helping someone else feel seen. Weeks passed. I built training guides and scheduled workshops. I created a welcome booklet that included advice from current employees. I invited people to share stories about their first weeks on the job. Many responses were funny or awkward. A few were honest and raw. One said, "I almost left during my first month. I thought I wasn't smart enough to stay, but someone believed in me, and that changed everything." I didn't know who wrote it, but I felt it deeply. That same evening, I went home and opened the notebook Daniel had given me. I flipped through the pages I had filled since that day on the bus. There were no long essays, just small moments. Things I had noticed, things I had felt. Lines like, "Don't rush past what you've already become," or "Some success comes without sound." It wasn't poetry. It was me, learning to speak kindly to myself. Then one morning, an unexpected email arrived. It was from Daniel. He was moving to a different country for a year-long project. The company had selected him to lead a new international campaign. It was a big opportunity, and he was excited. His message was short, but at the end, he wrote, "Thank you for helping me see things differently." I stared at that sentence for a while. I had thought he was the one who opened my eyes, but maybe I had done something for him too. I replied with a quiet wish for success and a line that felt honest. "Keep growing, wherever you go." After he left, something interesting happened. I realized I no longer looked for his name in team updates. I no longer waited for his voice in meetings. My thoughts didn't reach for him, and with that space, something new arrived. I became curious about others. I started noticing who stayed late without complaining, who helped the interns without being asked, who quietly fixed errors no one else had seen. They were not loud. They were not celebrated, but they were strong in their own way. I began to see value in different forms, and slowly I realized I wanted to help bring those hidden efforts into the light. That's when I started a small project called Voices from Within. It was simple. I invited staff from different departments to write short notes about their biggest lesson, their hardest moment, or the advice they wish they had known earlier. Each week, I posted one of these notes in the internal newsletter under the title. Some were humorous, like, "Always save your files," "Trust me." Others were more reflective. One note said, "It's okay to feel behind. What matters is that you keep going." The project caught attention. People looked forward to each week's entry. Managers started sharing them during team huddles. Someone from Human Resources asked if we could make a printed booklet of them for new employees. When I saw the first copy, I ran my fingers over the cover. It had the title in soft letters, and inside, it carried the honest voices of people who once felt invisible. One afternoon, I saw Nora again. She was walking down the hallway with a confident step. She was talking to a new hire, explaining something clearly and warmly. I slowed down to listen. She said, "I used to be so unsure, but someone told me that every expert was once a beginner. That helped me stay." I smiled. It was something I had said to her in our first session. She had remembered. She had passed it on. And now someone else would carry it forward. That, I thought, was the quiet magic of growth. My days were full, but not in a stressful way. I worked hard, but without the hunger to be seen. I gave my energy to things that mattered to me. I supported people, shared ideas, and stayed curious. I had changed, but not in a loud or dramatic way. I had simply returned to myself. One rainy Friday, as I packed my things, I found a folded paper inside my desk drawer. I didn't recognize it at first, but when I opened it, I saw that it was one of the old goal lists I had written during my darker days. It had lines like, "Try to beat Daniel in the next meeting," and "Stay longer than him. Be better." I read the words and felt no shame, only understanding. That version of me had been lost. She had been hurting. She had tried to find her worth in comparison because she didn't know where else to look. I folded the paper again, but this time with care. I placed it in my notebook under the last page, not to hide it, but to remember how far I had come. Now, when I talk to new staff, I tell them something simple. Success is not a spotlight. It is a path. Sometimes you walk alone. Sometimes you walk beside others. What matters is that you keep walking, even when you feel unseen. Looking back, I don't regret the jealousy. I regret letting it stay so long without understanding it. It had something to teach me. It showed me the parts of myself that were waiting to be loved. It forced me to stop chasing someone else's life and begin honoring my own. And Daniel? He became a part of that story, not the center of it. He taught me that the people we envy often carry fears we don't see. He reminded me that behind every perfect smile, there may be a silent struggle. He helped me begin a journey back to myself without even knowing it. I no longer measure my success with someone else's ruler. I no longer fear being behind. Because I have learned that moving forward, no matter the pace, is always enough. I hope you have enjoyed the story. Like and comment if you want to hear more soon.